Most men spend their lives building a legacy. But Elias Thorne spent a year building a coffin. He just didn't know he was the one who would have to sleep in it. Imagine standing in a palace you designed, holding a golden key to a front door you personally installed. Only to realize that the walls are screaming. You know the exact moment the roof will cave in. You know which wire will spark the fire that eventually consumes you. You know, because you are the one who hid the rot behind the paint. Elias Thorne was a man of absolute integrity, at least, that was the lie he sold for 22 years. But as he stood in the silence of his new home, he realized the most terrifying truth of all. We are all, at this very moment, living in the house we built for ourselves. This is how Elias Thorne built his. For over 22 years, Elias Thorne had been the shadow behind the billionaire Arthur Sterling. Quiet. Disciplined. Always a step behind his master, yet somehow always exactly where he needed to be. He was the man who made the world run smoothly for a titan of industry. He knew Arthur's routines better than Arthur knew them himself. The exact temperature of his morning coffee. The way he liked his suits pressed. The scent of the cologne he wore to board meetings. Even the names of grandchildren Arthur sometimes forgot. To the outside world, Elias Thorne was the gold standard of loyalty. The perfect steward. And Arthur Sterling never hesitated to praise him. At charity galas, during interviews, and around tables filled with powerful men, Arthur would often say, "A man like Elias is not an employee. He is a foundation. If my life has stability, it is because of him." People admired that relationship. From a distance, it looked like the purest form of trust. Loyalty. Gratitude. But admiration looks very different from the inside. Because while Arthur Sterling sat in the back of polished limousines praising the golden rule, Elias sat silently in the front seat staring into the rearview mirror. Watching a man spend $10,000 on a bottle of wine without a second thought, while his own shoes were wearing thin at the heels. And after 22 years, something inside Elias had quietly begun to rot. At first, it was small. Almost harmless. A thought that came and went like smoke. Why had he spent 22 years protecting another man's empire, while owning nothing that truly felt like his? The thought disturbed him because it felt selfish. Ungrateful. Dangerous. So he buried it. But buried thoughts have a way of growing roots. He never said it out loud. Not even fully to himself. But the feeling settled inside him. Like dust that refused to leave the room. Slowly, Elias began to feel that his integrity wasn't a virtue. It was a cage. And the more he watched Arthur move effortlessly through a world built by wealth, the more that cage began to close around him. Arthur Sterling, for all his brilliance, was not a cruel man. But wealth had wrapped around him like glass. He genuinely believed appreciation was enough. That praise was payment. That loyalty could be rewarded with kind words and public admiration. And somewhere deep inside, Elias had started to feel the distance between words and reality. The golden rule no longer sounded like wisdom to him. It sounded like a story rich men told to keep the help from stealing the silverware. And that was the most dangerous part of all. Because resentment does not arrive like fire. It arrives quietly. Like rust. Slowly eating through the foundations of a man long before the collapse is ever visible. One rainy evening, Arthur Sterling called Elias into his private study. The room smelled faintly of old books, leather, and brandy. Arthur looked older that night. Slower in movement now, his hands trembling slightly as he poured 2 glasses into crystal cups. But his presence still carried the quiet authority of a man who had spent decades being obeyed. "I want to build something," Arthur said softly. "One final project. A sanctuary house. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere perfect. He leaned back in his chair and studied Elias carefully. I'm too old now for the dust of construction sites, he said with a tired smile. So this time, I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom. A small silence settled between them. You'll handle everything, every decision, every detail. Choose the land. Hire the engineers. Buy the materials. Use the best of everything. Then Arthur lifted his glass slightly, and added, I trust you completely. In fact, I trust your judgment more than my own. Elias nodded quietly. That trust should have felt like honor. But instead, it felt like weight. Arthur continued, completely unaware of the conflict beginning to unfold behind Elias's calm expression. No compromise, he said. I want it to last longer than me. Then he smiled faintly. And I don't even want to visit during construction. I won't look at a single brick until the house is finished. I want the entire thing to be a surprise. That was the moment something shifted inside Elias. Because the words no compromise suddenly stopped sounding like instruction. And started sounding like opportunity. And trust started to sound like distance. As Elias walked out of the library that night, he didn't feel the weight of responsibility. He felt the weight of temptation. Arthur Sterling had just handed him a blank check and a closed eye. For the first time in 22 years, Arthur Sterling's trust no longer felt like admiration. It felt like blindness. And somewhere deep inside his mind, a dangerous thought quietly began to form. Arthur has billions. He'll never know if the foundation is 6 feet deep or 3. He'll never know if the pipes are copper or plastic. For 22 years, Elias had protected another man's empire. Now, for the first time in his life, he began to wonder what it would feel like to stop building another man's future, and finally build his own. This isn't just a house anymore. This is my retirement fund. And that was the moment the house truly began to collapse, long before the first brick was ever laid. The construction began 6 months later. Elias chose a location far from the city, hidden from prying eyes. A quiet valley where no curious investors, inspectors, or wealthy guests would casually appear. And when it came time to hire contractors, Elias made a decision that quietly changed everything. He didn't hire the best contractors. He hired men who were comfortable with shortcuts. Men who worked fast. Men who asked fewer questions. Men who understood that silence was part of the job. That some projects were built with concrete, and others were built with silence. At first, the compromises were almost invisible. A slightly cheaper concrete mix. Less steel reinforcement beneath the foundation. Lower-grade timber hidden behind polished walls. On paper, however, everything was perfect. Elias billed Arthur Sterling for premium grade A materials. Certified engineers, imported fixtures, reinforced structural systems designed to last generations. But the reality beneath the surface was very different. The concrete being poured into the foundation was weak, too lean, filled with more sand and rubble than cement. The expensive oak listed on invoices was replaced with green timber that would warp and rot within a few seasons. Premium copper wiring existed only on paper, while cheap, thinned-out cables were hidden behind layers of elegant wallpaper and imported chandeliers. The house was slowly becoming a masterpiece of deception. A performance. A beautiful lie wearing the costume of luxury. Still, there were moments when conscience tried to return. One came in the form of Samuel. Samuel was an old foreman. Honest. Experienced. The kind of man who could look at a structure and feel its future before the first wall was even complete. He pulled Elias aside one afternoon, standing in a half-finished hallway. His voice was low. "Elias, this concrete isn't right." He pointed toward the foundation below them. "It's too weak. If anything shifts in the ground, the east wing will fail." He hesitated. "We need to tear it out and rebuild it properly." For a moment, Elias said nothing. He just stared at him. And in that silence, something important died. Because Elias didn't ask questions. He didn't investigate. He didn't even look concerned. He simply looked at Samuel and said, "You're fired." Samuel blinked. "What?" Elias's voice stayed calm. His expression never changed. "I didn't hire you for your conscience," he said calmly. "I hired you for your silence." The words hung in the air like something already broken. Samuel was escorted out later that day. And as the old foreman walked away, Elias noticed a thin crack in the unfinished wall. Small. Jagged. Barely visible. Almost harmless. He walked over slowly, and covered it with plaster. Smooth. Clean. Invisible again. And for a moment, he believed that meant it was gone. Elias convinced himself that invisible meant harmless. He told himself it didn't matter. Arthur would never live here anyway. The months rolled by, and the deception only grew deeper. The house continued rising into the valley like a monument to success. From a distance, it looked magnificent. Elegant lines. Towering windows. Imported marble floors. Beautiful structure. Expensive finishes that shimmered beneath golden light. But up close, it was something else entirely. A performance. A masterpiece of theater. The walls were painted in soft, luxurious tones, but behind them the wood was damp and unseasoned, already beginning to decay. The chandeliers sparkled with imported crystal, but the wiring above them was tangled, cheap, unstable, humming with hidden danger. Every beautiful surface had a secret underneath it. A truth no one was meant to see. Arthur visited only once during construction. He didn't enter the site. He simply stood at the gate, looking out from his car. And he smiled. "Looking good, Elias," he shouted. "I knew I could trust you." Then he left. And Elias stood there, watching the car disappear. His pockets now carrying more money than he had ever held in his life. By the time construction was nearing completion, nearly $500,000 had quietly disappeared from the project, and into accounts no one would ever trace. He told himself it was balance. That he deserved something too. That after 22 years of loyalty, this was simply life paying him back. That nothing was truly being lost. But deep down inside him, beneath all the justifications and stolen comfort, a quieter truth had already begun to form. He was not building a house anymore. He was building consequences. Months later, the project was complete. Arthur organized a retirement dinner. A grand event. Soft music. Crystal glasses. Powerful guests. The kind of room where history was made quietly, through conversation and applause. The house itself looked magnificent in the moonlight. Inside, the chandeliers sparkled, but the wiring behind them hummed with a dangerous hidden heat. Arthur Sterling stood at the head of the long mahogany table. His voice was older now, but still steady. "For 22 years, he began, I have watched this man serve me. People ask me why I trust so blindly. I tell them it's because a man's character is his destiny." He turned slightly. His eyes found Elias. "Elias, you have spent your life in guest wings and staff quarters. I didn't want a sanctuary house for myself. I wanted to see what kind of home you would build for a man you truly respected." A pause. "Because this house, it was never for me." His voice softened. "It was a gift for you." The room went deathly silent. The air felt heavy, like it had been pulled out of the room. Arthur continued. "The deed is in your name. The foundation, the walls, this very roof above us, it's all yours, Elias. Then, gently, go live in the masterpiece you have created." Arthur reached into his pocket and placed a key on the table. "It is yours." A silence followed that no one dared to break. Then Arthur smiled softly. "I built it for you, Elias. Enjoy your new home." For a moment, the room did not move. No one spoke. No one breathed loudly. Only Elias. Because in that instant, something inside him finally understood what it had been avoiding for years. This was not a gift. It was a mirror. An hour later, the guests were gone. Elias stood alone in the center of the grand living room. The silence was absolute. And then, he heard it. Creak. It was the sound of substandard timber warping. Then came another sound. Drip. 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 A pipe behind the expensive wallpaper was already starting to weep. He walked through the hallway. Each step sounded different than the last. Like the house was learning how to fail. He turned on the light in the master bedroom. It flickered. Hummed. Unstable. He placed his hand on the wall. Cold. Too cold. And then he heard it again. Drip, drip, drip. Inside the walls. He opened a drawer. Inside was a framed document. A home for a man of integrity. Elias Thorne fell to his knees on the floor he knew would eventually collapse. He looked at the golden key in his hand. And for the first time in his life, he understood the true cost of what he had built. He had spent a year trying to steal a future from a man who had already given it to him. He was a millionaire with a palace. But he was a prisoner in a death trap of his own making. He had finally gotten exactly what he deserved. He was living in the house he had built for himself. A structure too fragile to trust. A beauty too dangerous to live in. A gift that could not be returned. And as the first storm of the season began to rattle the windows, Elias Thorne realized that he would never truly feel safe again. Because as the storm outside grew stronger, he finally understood something unbearable. He had not been betrayed. He had simply been handed everything he had spent his life quietly building. The most terrifying prison isn't made of iron bars, it's made of your own choices. Elias is now trapped in a house that's literally screaming under the weight of his lies. But he wasn't the only one. Arthur Sterling was watching. To see the true ending of the Sterling legacy, subscribe now for part 2. Don't build a life you're afraid to live in. Click the notification bell so you don't miss more true life thrillers.